Now, a new analysis shows that the 6-ton iconic altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge.
For 5,000 years, Stonehenge kept its secrets in plain sight. Every generation of historians walked the same circle, measured the same stones, and left with the same handful of theories and a much longer list of questions. Then we stopped trusting our eyes and handed the whole thing to the machines. Every laser scan, every core sample, every chemical reading. And the patterns the software pulled back out were not the ones anyone had been staring at for 300 years. One of them quietly rewrites where these stones actually came from. The monument that never added up.
The sun rises exactly in line with that stone over there.
Start with where it sits. Stonehenge rises out of the flat chalk of Salisbury Plain, about 90 miles southwest of London, in the middle of open farmland that gives it nothing to hide behind. And the strangeness starts before you even get to who built it. Look at what it is made of. The outer ring is sarsen stone, blocks over 20 feet tall, some closing in on 25 tons each, dragged from the Marlborough Downs, roughly 20 miles to the north, then capped with horizontal lintels locked into place with joints you would expect a carpenter to cut into hardwood, mortise and tenon, tongue and groove. Carved here into raw rock by people the standard story insists had no metal tools to do it with. For most of recorded history, nobody even believed ordinary humans had done this. Medieval writers handed the credit to Merlin and to giants because the thing looked like it needed something larger than human hands. Inside that ring sit the blue stones, smaller but still up to 4 tons apiece. And those came from the Prehistoric Hills in Wales, about 150 miles away. No wheels rated for that load, no cranes, no iron. Sit with that for a second because everyone hurries past it. Modern crews with hydraulic lifts and steel cable still sweat moving a single 25-ton block. The textbook answer has always been log rollers, rope, earth ramps, and a great many patient generations. Nobody disputes that it happened. The stones are there. The question that kept surfacing once the data went into the machines was never really how they moved them. It was why these particular stones were worth moving at all. Hold on to that question. The first real answer comes from a rock nobody was even bothering to look at. The stone that came from the wrong country.
A team of archaeologists has discovered a major new prehistoric monument just a short distance from Stonehenge.
Flat in the center of the whole monument lies a single slab everyone had quietly filed away. The altar stone. 6 tons of gray-green sandstone, 5 meters long, lying on its back beneath 2 fallen giants. For 100 years, the assumption was simple and never really tested. It looked like it belonged with the blue stones, so it must have come from Wales too, filed and forgotten since 1923. Then a team ground down tiny fragments of it and did something no medieval scholar or Victorian antiquarian ever could. They read the age and chemistry of the individual mineral grains locked inside the rock. Zircon, apatite, rutile. Each grain carries a kind of birth certificate, a spread of ages set when it first crystallized hundreds of millions of years ago. Together, those grains form a fingerprint, and software can take that fingerprint and compare it, forensically, against a database of sandstone from all across Britain and beyond. Then it went looking for the one place on the island that matched. Before I tell you where it pointed, hit subscribe now, because this single answer quietly breaks the map that every history of Stonehenge has been drawn on, and the buried landscape right after it is somehow worse. Here is what the match came back as. Not Wales, not anywhere in southern England, the old red sandstone of the Orcadian Basin in northeast Scotland, more than 750 kilometers away, over 450 miles. The lead researcher has admitted he looked at that first batch of data and simply refused to believe it because there was no way a rock at the heart of an English monument should read as so distinctly Scottish. He ran it again. The statistics held above 95% confidence. Think about what that quietly does to the story. A 6-ton slab was somehow carried the length of the island, most likely by sea, 5,000 years ago, and set down in the exact center of everything. And it deepens the mystery instead of solving it, because now the same builders were reaching not one direction, but 3. Sarsens from the north of the plain, bluestones from Wales in the west, and this one great slab from the far north of Scotland. Nobody ever saw that in the shape of the stone. It was hidden inside the chemistry, invisible until the right tool went looking for it. And if a single overlooked rock can redraw the map like that, the ground around it was about to do something stranger still. The landscape nobody could see. For most of its history, Stonehenge was studied as a thing you walk up to, a circle you stand inside. What almost nobody could do, until recently, was see what lay under the grass for miles in every direction. Then survey teams began dragging ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers across the whole landscape, feeding the readings into software that turns faint buried echoes into a map. What came back was not empty countryside. Under the plain, a couple of miles northeast of the monument, near the enormous henge at Durrington Walls, the instruments picked up a ring of massive pits, more than 20 of them confirmed, each up to 20 meters across and 5 meters deep, arranged in a circle better than 1.25 miles wide. For a century, some of these had been written off as natural sinkholes or old ponds for watering cattle. The data said otherwise. Later, coring, sediment analysis, and dating settled it. These were dug on purpose, by hand, with tools of wood, bone, and antler, and they surround the very place where the builders of Stonehenge actually lived. The archaeologist who led the survey called the ring unprecedented in Britain, not a scatter of accidents. A single deliberate structure on a scale no one standing on the ground could ever have perceived while making it. The kind of pattern that only resolves when you lift the whole landscape into a computer and look down on it from above. And this is the shift that matters. Stonehenge was never the whole project. It is the centerpiece of something far larger that was sitting in the soil the entire time, waiting for a tool patient enough to trace its outline, which raises the obvious next question. If they were shaping the land on that scale, what were they shaping it to do? Part of the answer, it turns out, is something you were meant to hear. The stones that were meant to be heard. Here is a detail that sounds invented and is not. Some of those Welsh bluestones ring. Strike one, and instead of a dull thud, you get a clear, sustained, bell-like tone. Researchers who went back and tested the outcrops in the Preseli Hills found whole stretches of rock that chime when struck. Whether that sound was part of why these exact stones were chosen, nobody can prove. But it is a real, measurable property of the precise rock they hauled 150 miles. So, a separate team went after the sound of the whole finished monument. Because too many of the real stones are missing, or fallen to test it directly, they built a precise 1/12 scale model from the site's own laser scans, reconstructing all 157 stones as they likely stood around 2200 BCE, and ran acoustic measurements inside it. The result is quieter than the myths and stranger for being true. The stones worked. Inside the ring, the surfaces reflected and held sound, lifting a speaking voice by several decibels and enriching anything like a drum or a chant. But it did not carry outward. Someone standing just beyond the circle would have heard almost nothing. The acoustics were built inward for the few people permitted inside, sealing the sound into an intimate space while the crowd that had hauled the stones stood outside it, shut out of the moment they built. I want to be straight with you, because the internet is stuffed with the opposite claim. The team behind that study concluded sound was probably not the main force driving the design. It was an effect, not necessarily the purpose. What most likely came first was the sky, and that is where the last hidden pattern is still being pulled out of these stones, right now. The moon hidden in the stones. Everyone knows the sun part. On the summer solstice, the sunrise lines up straight down the avenue and through the heart of the circle, and that alignment is not in dispute. The builders locked the solstice axis into the architecture on purpose. What is far less known is the moon. Set outside the main circle are 4 points called the station stones. Arranged in a rectangle, the short sides point at the solstice sun. The long sides point somewhere stranger. They line up. With the moon at its most extreme rising and setting positions, the limits it only reaches at the peak of an 18.5-year cycle called a major lunar standstill. Once in nearly 2 decades, the moon swings further north and south along the horizon than most people alive have ever noticed. That connection has been argued over for 60 years, and across 2024 and 2025, with a standstill actually underway, a team from English Heritage and 3 universities went out to Stonehenge month after month to record it and finally test whether the alignment is real or a coincidence. Here is the detail that cools the back of your neck. The cremated dead, from the earliest phase of the site, buried before the giant stones ever went up, are not scattered evenly. They cluster in the southeast, in the same direction as the southernmost moonrise at that standstill, and 3 timber posts were driven into the bank, pointing the very same way. So, the moon may already have been woven into this place before the first sarsen was raised. There is an older idea in the same family. The 56 pits ringing the site, the Aubrey holes, have been proposed since the 1960s as a way of tracking the moon and predicting eclipses across that same long cycle. It has never been proven, and plenty of experts still doubt it. But notice the thread running through all of it. Sun, moon, the dead, the pits, the rectangle. This place keeps pointing at the sky over and over in ways it took modern instruments to line up. What the machine still cannot tell us. So, line up everything the tools actually found, with nothing invented bolted on. A central stone carried the length of Britain, uncovered not by digging, but by reading its chemistry. A buried ring of giant pits no eye could see, pulled out of the ground by radar. A circle engineered to hold sound for the few people inside it. A monument that keeps aligning itself to the sun and the moon across cycles longer than a single human life. Every one of those is a real pattern, and every one of them sat unnoticed until the right instrument went looking. That is the honest version of what happened here. We did not need a secret machine or a lost superhuman race. We needed better tools than eyes and rope, and 3 centuries of educated guessing. And the moment we finally pointed them at Stonehenge, patterns surfaced that the entire history of the site had walked straight past. But notice what the machines still cannot hand us. They can tell us the altar stone is Scottish. They cannot tell us why anyone dragged it 750 kilometers, or how or who decided it had to sit at the center. They can trace the ring of pits and the lunar alignment down to the meter. They cannot tell us what any of it meant to the people who spent generations building it. The data has grown sharper with every new tool we point at the site. The reason it was all built stays exactly as dark as it was 300 years ago. And that gap, the space between what we can now measure and what we may never understand, is exactly the part worth sitting in. If patterns hidden for 5,000 years can surface the second we finally look properly, then Stonehenge is almost certainly not done talking. Subscribe so you are here when the next one gets decoded. And tell me in the comments which of these hidden patterns should never have gone unnoticed for this long. The Scottish stone, the buried ring, or the moon locked into the rectangle.